Check, check. So After Effects is the easiest software to use to do color keying. I have put some files in the shared drive. You go to shared drive, DDA 500, virtual production, Raider. They're in there. I think it's a zip folder called EX keying something something. I'm on my laptop, so I can't pull it up right now. We're going to use two of them today if you just want to get them both now. And we're going to use the EX one and we're going to use the AE tracking one. EX files underscore AE guru. That one. And then the AE tracking files, they should both be in there. Yeah, I see them. They're both in there. Thanks for the confirmation, y'all. You know, yesterday I was teaching a class, and, you know, as happens sometimes when you're extending your desktop, I'm teaching, I'm going over like some menus in a program, and it's just like my Windows desktop up on the projector. And 20 students, nobody fucking says anything for like 90 seconds. I noticed, and was like, guys, what are we looking at? I should have just kept going for 2 hours, you know? Like, really? This is your tuition dollars. Okay, so those are the files we're going to be working with. Inside of that folder, the AE Guru ones, there's just a bunch of files that I stole a long time ago from somewhere, some tutorial somewhere. But you know, it's just a bunch of green screen videos, very compressed video. You know how we talked about not using compressed video, using a good camera. These were not done using any of those things. They're just MP4 files. So After Effects, the easiest software to use for keying, but the results are not great. That's not to say that you can't do great things with After Effects, but at a certain point, the software starts to work against you. So let's get started. I'm going to use this isn't an After Effects 101 class or anything like that. But I'm going to use the greenscreen2.mp4 file, and I'm going to create a new composition from it. Check, check. Let this play out. Pretty straightforward portrait. Green screen's pretty all right. There's some slight wrinkles in the background, but you know, this is probably the best green screen that you could ever hope for. And honestly, it's pretty fine. It's fairly even to our eyes. And we should have no problem keying it out. You know, if we look here, there is some fine detail in her hair. It is somewhat motion blurred. Motion blur is always kind of our enemy when keying. And also, you can start to see the downsides of shooting with 8-bit color MP4 footage. All of these edges start to kind of bleed together, which is fine if you're just making videos to upload to social media, but not fine in the world of visual effects. We need all of those colors, all of that data. Yes. The DDA, yeah. There should be a zip file called this. Yep, you got it. You got it. You can get the AE tracking one too. We'll use that later. That's the big one. Yeah, please interrupt me at any point. Seriously. All right, so pretty straightforward to do in After Effects. We're just going to use the key light effect. So over in the effects panel, in the default menu layout of After Effects, we're going to go, and I never go through these menus. I just type in the search, key light. Key light. And key light is fine. It's okay. It's not great, but it gets the job done most of the time. So I'm just drag the effect on top of the layer. Nothing seems to happen. That's okay. It's because we haven't done anything with the effect. So in the effects controls for the layer, or for the effect, we essentially just march on down through these steps. First, we pick a screen color with the little eyedropper tool. Where should you pick? What part of the green should we pick? What would be a good idea? The majority color. The middlest value. What if the middlest value is up here? That's okay? What is the most important part of this video right here? Where the person is, right? Not this wrinkle, right? And honestly, the most important part is just this, right? We can easily mask out the inside of her head. She doesn't move even much in this. But the most important part, arguably, I would say, is probably right here, where you have a lot of these flyaway hairs. And I'm just making that decision from one frame here, but it's always a good idea to scrub your video and take a look at it. Even here, there's a lot of motion that's happening all of a sudden. I think a lot of people that are starting out with keying, they expect a push button solution, like click, I put the effect on, I'm done for 5 minutes of footage. That's not necessarily the case. I want you to start to think about, in this class, how can I break this footage up into multiple pieces, time-wise perhaps, different scenarios perhaps for different movements that happen in the video. But I also want you to start to think about, how can I break this image up into different sections? My approach for her hair might be different than the approach for her face. My approach for her hair might be different than the approach that I take on the shirt. A lot of people are going to just apply one effect to this, click the button, good enough, done for everything. That is not always going to give you the best job. So in this case, this is going to be relatively straightforward, but we're going to look at some other examples where we're going to have to build it up. So first step, let's just get the screen color eyedropper, and I suggest picking a green close to her head. After Effects newbies always get kind of confused because the default composition color is black. If you don't know, you can always click on the little transparency grid checkerboards down here, and that will actually show you the transparency grid behind her. I like to flip back and forth because I scrub this right now, and this looks pretty clean. But if I look at it on black, it's hard to tell in the projector, I suppose, but at least for me, in the top corner here, there's a lot of noise that I can see. So after I get my initial key, what I like to do is switch over using this menu to status. Status shows you a very brute force matte of your image. The black pixels here are fully transparent, the white ones are fully opaque, and the gray ones are somewhere in between. Ideally, we're going to want the subject to be white, the fringes of hair to be gray, and then the background to be black. That's not the case right now. So the next thing we want to play around with is the screen gain and the screen balance. I always like doing this because it's Halloween time. It's pretty horrifying. You play around with the screen gain a little bit to clean up the background. And these settings are not set in stone. We can adjust them as we move around. You play around with the balance to find a happy medium between how the key treats the subject and the background. You scrub through the footage a little bit, see how it looks during time. And you should never be concerned with elements of your background that are not going to be overlapped by your subject. You know, this portrait here, she doesn't move around a lot. In fact, she never moves into this top right quadrant. I just make a quick mask on her and get rid of that stuff entirely, not rely on the key light effect at all, just mask it out. Mask it out. You run into a little bit of trouble with that if your subject moves around the frame a lot. Then you'd have to start getting into doing animated masks, which could be quite complicated depending on how much movement you have. In this case, though, this is relatively straightforward, so we could mask that edge out manually. So after I take a look at that, I'd like to switch my status menu to Screen Matte. Screen Matte is going to show you a very high resolution alpha matte of your subject. The reason I like to use status is because it shows me very aggressively what are the good and bad areas in my image, whereas Screen Matte, it's a little bit more dim, it's not quite as obvious. I bounce back and forth between those. So you're not going to be able to tell on the projector because it washes things out. But on your end, you go and further dial in that gain setting and the balance setting. I think I'm pretty happy with where those were to begin with. Now, as far as the gain setting goes, I'm not going to crank it so much that I clean up my entire background. Now I've gotten rid of the noise up in the top. I've gotten rid of the noise over here. But at expense of what? What did I lose by cranking this? I lost all of that hair detail, right? So that is your mission, is finding appropriate settings to get rid of enough of the background for you to retain the fine detail of the hair without getting rid of too much. That's where the masking comes in handy. And potentially that's where breaking this subject up into multiple pieces might be a thing. Maybe you need to do the left side of the hair differently from the right side. That's something that we'll get into in a little bit. So at this point, I still see a little bit of noise in the top right. If I'm not masking it out manually, I could play around with the clip black and clip whites. Don't be super aggressive with these values. Again, you're going to chew into the hair really quickly, and we don't want to do that. If we're losing any detail in hair, we're doing it wrong. So I'm just going to add a little bit of clip black, just enough to clean it up. I'm not even sure I need any clip white. So the clip white can start to blotch up too. Maybe at this point, an idea is to switch from Screen Matte to Final Result in the dropdown. And maybe throw on that transparency grid, maybe keep it off. Let it play, see how it looks. Now, there's not a ton of hair detail to begin with because this is a compressed MP4, but it's pretty clean. And I don't see a lot of chattering pixels or anything. There's a little bit, but nothing too devastating. Now at this point, if you're happy with the key, you can move on to the next and last step, the replace method. I like to change this usually to source, because I don't like key light to get rid of my green screen spill. I like to use a different effect for that. And if you do notice that a little green screen spill has been introduced back into things, you can use the advanced spill suppressor effect in After Effects. It's a 32-bit effect. Not that we really need it for this compressed video file here. And I usually like to set this just to its default settings. I change the method from standard to ultra, but I usually leave all this other stuff the same. And that cleaned up a little bit of green screen spill on the hair. There wasn't a ton to begin with. I know some students last week talked about having a lot of spill on their subjects. Spill suppressor will take it right out. Your problem is probably going to be getting a clean key from that. And you may have to break it up into multiple pieces, as we'll talk about a little bit later. So am I happy with this? I think this is pretty much about as good as it can get for this very compressed video footage. This is where you need to think, does it look good on transparency grid? Cool, great. Does it look good on black? Cool, great. Does it look good if I put her on top of herself a couple times? Cool, great. Doesn't hurt to try a couple different scenarios just to quickly tell if it's looking good or not. Sometimes I'll put a gradient behind her. But really, what the most important thing is the background that you're actually compositing it onto. It doesn't have to look good on black. It doesn't have to look good on solid white. It doesn't have to look good on the transparency grid. All it has to look good on is the background that you're actually compositing it into. And I think this is where a lot of people beat themselves up, is they're trying to make it perfect, when in reality, perfection doesn't really matter. You just need to make it as good as it looks, as good as possible to make it look great on your background. And you're not going to be able to do the final keying even until you have that background. So at this point, if I was compositing her onto some sort of background graphic, this would be a good starting point, but I would have to revisit this after I have my backgrounds rendered out. When I'm ready to do my final composite, I have to come back to this and maybe adjust some settings to get the best that I could get. At that point, I'm not even worried about keying, but maybe I want to relight her hair, maybe color grade her hair if she has a brighter background behind her. I have to think about all these other things into it in addition to keying that are not just about removing the background, removing the green screen, but are about actually doing the final composite. So at this point, I think I'm happy with where this stands for this, but we definitely would have to revisit when we composite it onto a true background. Some other, any tips, any questions about that? It's pretty basic After Effects keying. Not that I think this is necessary for this case, but sometimes something that I'll do, if I'm not going to mask out with a garbage mask around her, this is not even going to work because she moves too much. But I have to find the point where the edges are, where the edges are, because I definitely don't want to do I don't want to animate the mask if I don't have to. Come on. There we go. Sometimes this little monitor is too small to be able to see everything. Where you go? Over there. At this point, it's is this really giving me anything if I spend the time to do this? I do get rid of the corners, right? I think I lost a little bit down there, a little bit there. You're masking out your footage ahead of time with what's called a garbage mask, also incredibly useful to do. But another quick way to do something like this, instead of doing a pen tool mask, sometimes I will put a very rough, aggressive key light mask on. And then I will just grow the edges, go to source color, and here I have a garbage mask just with key light. Just by shrinking and growing that matte, all I did was just do a really rough key, and then I just grew the screen, grew the screen matte. So now I actually have, a tracking mat around her. And then I would add another key light maybe, and then do the key on that. Is that necessary for this footage? Probably not. We did good just with the single click button solution. But maybe your footage requires different tactics. Every footage is going to require slightly different strategy. And it's your job to figure out what that strategy should be. Any questions about that? You all After Effects wizards? I don't know. After Effects? What's After Effects? The Photoshop of video, right? Well, between us, even though this is being recorded, between us, I would never use After Effects for keying anymore. I would use Fusion myself. A little birdies told me that some of you have some Nuke knowledge. Use Nuke instead. Nuke is the VFX tool of choice for compositing and keying. You should use that tool. But once you leave this place, you can't get Nuke anymore. Maybe non-commercial version, you might have to use some other tools. Now, I'm not trying to say that After Effects is garbage, but at a certain point, the software starts to work against you. So I'm going to show you a little bit of Fusion now. So Fusion Blackmagic Fusion is made by Blackmagic Design. Blackmagic makes DaVinci Resolve, and Resolve and Fusion come bundled together in a free version of Resolve. That was like their initial claim to fame, but now, like it used to be, people would do their editing in Final Cut or Premiere or Avid or something like that, and then they would use Resolve for color because their color science was so good. But now, like the rest of the suite has been built out. It's super robust editing platform. I would use Resolve entirely rather than jumping back and forth. So inside Resolve, you have a video editing program. You have a color grading software. You have a node-based compositing software, Fusion. You have all of those things bundled together. Why jump to Nuke when everything's in Resolve already, right? I'm a fanboy, so I'll stick with that. Resolve is free. It comes bundled with a free version of Fusion as well. There are few limitations to that. The main limitation is that you can't render out greater than 4K, which for most people, I would say that's not a problem. It can ingest 8K, 12K footage, but you can't render out more than 4K unless you buy the software. And it's pretty cheap too. $300 for life rather than $300 a year for Adobe. Pretty cool. Fusion is also a standalone program, but you do get a free version of Fusion bundled in Resolve. What are the downsides of not having the pro version of Fusion? There's a couple nodes that you can't use. Most of those have to do with like 3D relighting, because Fusion is 3D like Nuke is. Most of the nodes is fine. It does have a rendering limit of 4K again, but most of the stuff, I always tell students to download DaVinci Resolve and they just use the free version and it's fine, and they never look back. So I'm going to show you some stuff in Fusion. real quick. I am remoting into a desktop across town, so hopefully this isn't too slow. So this is the standalone version of Fusion Studio, the $300 version. But everything that I show in here, you can do with the free version. Let's just look at the free version first. So this is DaVinci Resolve. And I kind of like you to just go across the workflow on the bottom here. So here's your media page where you look at your media. Oh, I remember that video. We just did that. Here's the cut page where you make your basic cuts. Here's the timeline, like in Premiere. Same exact thing. Here's the Fusion page if you want to do node-based compositing. Let me get my nodes here so you can see. Here's my node tree. It's very tiny on this tiny screen laptop. Oh yeah, you have to do it like this. You have to pay the $600 to zoom in. Oh, that's a joke. That's a joke. You have to squint. And then there's the color grading page, which we're not going to get into. This isn't a Resolve class. We don't even have the software on this computer. But fully featured suite. Our point today, though, is I want to show green screen keying in Fusion. And I already have some stuff open in Fusion Studio. I will say that, yes, this is done in Fusion Studio right now, but 95 times out of 100, I will just use Resolve Fusion to do all of my keying. And it's absolutely fine. No, absolutely not. This is a competitor. This is a sacrilege to say. You can't say stuff like that. So everything I show you in Fusion Studio, you can do with the free version. I'm not using any nodes that you can't use in the free version. So let's just let's go through some things. So I already have this keyed out, but I'll walk through my pipeline here. And this node system, there might be, like you might use the keylight node instead of the delta keyer in Nuke, but the idea is kind of the same, everything that I show you. Not sure why this is so washed out on the projector, but it is what it is. So in this shot, this is an acceptable green screen. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's good. There's a hot spot up here. I'll admit it, I shot this. So, even your heroes can fuck up green screens too, What can I say? I didn't have enough lights that day. We just made it work, right? So uneven green screen, that's okay. Really, the most important part of the green screen is just the hair around her. And she has tons of flyaway hairs, right? We want to keep all of that stuff. And we will. So in this pipeline, get rid of this little window. In this pipeline, I have used 3 separate keys. I've broken up her picture into 3 separate segments, which is something I talked about even in After Effects, using masks to break things up into different pieces. This piece is just the hair and part of her body. This piece is her lower body. But notice that it's not the boots. The boots are a little transparent right here because they're green. And then the last key is a garbage mat to fix the boots and the body. All of those things get merged together, just like in Nuke. This is the head and the body merged together, which gives me a pretty darn good key. But we don't have the boots yet. So then I go to the next merge where I bring in, that garbage mat for the body. And there's the boots fixed. There's just a bunch of polygon masks here to mask things out. If she moved around a lot, you know, I'd have to animate these masks. But for this is fine. All of this stuff comes together, but the last step is to clean up the spill. And she has a little bit of spill on her hair here, right? But look at this key, look at this, compared to the original. Let's do a side by side. The original, and then the unspilled matte. Oops. Well, there's the matte. Looks pretty darn good, I think. Practically zero loss in detail. And this image was kind of grainy, actually. This was shot at 800 ISO. So the last step, let's see it cleaned up with a little spill. Got rid of the green screen spill. And then just for giggles at the end, I put it on a background just to make sure that I was doing a good job. Oops, let's go to this. Oops. Just a gradient. But look at all that hair detail maintained. Much better than Keylight. In After Effects, at least. Another one. Same sort of idea. Here I broke this up into 3 different sections. This time the hair and the head was broken up into a couple different pieces. So this is just the one side of the hair. Because I noticed that the key that was good for this side of the hair was not good for the other side. So I thought, you know, why don't we just split this up? Here's the key for the other side. Merge those two together. Now I have the head and the back of the body. Here's the key for the right side of the body. Delta keyer is the best keyer for fusion. That's that part of the body. So this has 4 different areas. The left hair, the right body, and then the filled in body, the garbage mat for the body and the feet. This is just the garbage mat for the feet, but none of the hair. And then this is with everything put together. Pretty straightforward. We're all going to do node-based keying from now on. Honestly, you know, years ago when I switched over from After Effects, it was like the most amazing thing. I had no idea why I was just like stabbing myself in the eye, basically, trying to get Keylight and After Effects to work. Last example here, this is a same idea. It's just a little bit bigger node system. All of these are just different polygon masks, which you can see here, because the chair has a lot of cutout areas. A lot of polygon masks. And then it's a similar sort of thing. I didn't organize this one as well for demo. What is this? This part of the hair. This part of the hair. That part of the hair. All getting merged together in the final product. Which I think looked pretty good. This is for a project that I'm working on. This is the previs for it with just stand-in 3D models, but all of this footage that we just looked at here is going to plug in to here. This is not me yet. This will be me. Huh? Heck yeah. You want to see the working version of me? That's me. Right there. I'm not going to zoom in on that. I'll leave that to the imagination. But yeah, that's for a project. I've shown you some of this, but this is one of the ones that's almost done.
So they're not videos.
These are just stills. That's me. Yeah. This was all Unreal except that that's me. Yes, that's right there. Can you tell from the little things on that hang down from the neck? Right, that's me. This is all Unreal except for the chickens. The chickens were Arnold rendered from Maya, so they couldn't quite get the fidelity from Unreal. And then this is actually a miniature, like a little Halloween village style miniature that maybe your grandma has on the like the Christmas villages, you know, the little miniatures. They have Halloween village ones too. So that's a still picture. This is a 3D scan of another Halloween village miniature. Yeah, there's a couple of these. But yeah, just a little quick tour of Fusion. If you have dabbled in Nuke, but you're frightened about it, that's understandable because Nuke will kick your ass. But it's the industry standard for a reason because it is pretty darn good. But also, since it is the industry standard, there's not a ton of effort into making it feel approachable to new people. So you kind of just left to like drowned on your own in YouTube videos while you know the experts like get on their high horse about why you don't understand the software already. Fusion, much higher learning curve than After Effects, but not as high as Nuke. Much more approachable, I think, and basically free if you're using the light version with Resolve. So I'm not saying you should convert from Nuke, but just putting that out there. They're just tools at the end of the day, right? So use the tool that works best for you. Any other questions about Fusion before we move on? No? Usually I spend like a whole class going over keying, but I trust you guys that you have some background in that already.